removing the gambling from my life allowed me to open up my perspective on all the things that were possible to live and think a better life for myself.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the One Day at a Time Gambling Addiction Podcast. Today I have a very special guest here with you, and he's going to be sharing his story about his gambling addiction and the harm that it's brought into his life. His name is Anthony. I'm going to pass it over to him now. Anthony, how you doing today?
Good, Rob. Thanks for having me. My name's Anthony. Definitely a compulsive gambler. My last bet was December 1st, 2019. I'm 30 years old and been gambling before my last bet for, as long as I could remember, middle school. It was one of those things where I gravitated toward it naturally, have a very addictive, compulsive type personality. I deal with it with eating and spending. And so naturally, it was a great way for me to fill a void young in life when I really felt like I was never good enough. And so it was a nice escape for me. I played sports my whole life, so I happened to bet on sports, which is funny. And yeah, I hit a rock bottom November of 2019. I had some conversations with my parents over the years prior to that about gambling, and told them a handful of times that I would stop, and I never could on my own. And so in November, hit rock bottom. I was north of six figures of debt, where I basically took out a number of different personal loans. I maxed out credit cards 2 times. My credit score was sub 500. I was 60 pounds overweight. And so this gambling addiction didn't only take a toll on me financially, but my mental health as well. And all the other aspects of my life were ruined. Relationships. My self-esteem was down the drain. And, after my mom had caught me in November, I finally gave myself a chance and turned over my willpower and kind of surrendered and accepted that I actually did have a problem that needed to be addressed, and I needed help from outside sources. So I started to go to Gamblers Anonymous in December. I got a sponsor. I worked the steps, and happy to say I haven't made a bet of any kind since. It's been over 3.5 years, and Rob and I got a chance to connect through TikTok. Funny enough. The universe works in funny ways, and I'm a big proponent of sharing my story to help others. And so, that's the goal of today, and I'm really excited for the conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for that intro. So firstly, congratulations on staying clean for so long.
Thank you.
But with staying clean for that long, and you said you haven't placed a bet since that day, you haven't had any form of relapse in your gambling addiction recovery journey?
I haven't. No. Well, so since I enrolled into GA, I haven't. But prior to going into GA, there was a number of times where I would tell my parents, this is it, I'm stopping, and I would stop for 6 months and go back. But yeah, since my enrollment in GA, I haven't had any relapses of any kind.
Dude, that's awesome. But unfortunately, that makes you a statistical anomaly, because I think about 90% of the people who go through a formal recovery process, such as a GA meeting, about 90% of them, they have some form of relapse over the years. So congratulations on that. You're doing awesome, and I hope that people can draw inspiration from your story and what we're about to talk about. So I know that you have a very large presence over on LinkedIn. So it is ironic that we met on TikTok, because it's probably the polar opposite app in terms of its user base. But you want to tell the audience maybe a little bit about what your purpose is over on LinkedIn?
Yeah, for sure. So I work in sales, and there's a big presence of sales professionals on LinkedIn, and there's been a increase in content creation on LinkedIn to help other people. And so it's probably November 2021 when I started posting on LinkedIn. I had been on the sidelines for a while. I had been almost 2 years into my recovery. And at that point, I'd been working the steps. And, when you start to work the steps, you really start to get an understanding of, character defects, perspective, and you learn about all the things that were going on that you really didn't realize at the time that give you this new perspective. And so for me, I felt like, like step 12 says, is like basically helping other people is the message that may have a similar situation to yours. And what I found was, by me posting on LinkedIn and sharing my story, not only was it an outlet for me to, like journal in public and get my voice out in public, but I started getting DMs from people of from all different aspects of life, not only with gambling addictions, but drug, alcohol, eating. And I was surprised to see how many people were struggling with this idea of addiction. And so for me, LinkedIn has been a great avenue, not only talk about sales tips and all that, but more importantly, the mental health, the mindset aspect. And I really view it as a way to use my struggles that has given me purpose to now want to help other people. Because there's no better feeling than, you put out a message and you connect with someone and they tell you, I'm 120 days clean from alcohol because of what you said. And I feel like I'm not alone and I can do this. And so to me, like that is what brings me a lot of energy and joy. And that's kind of why I've continued to post on LinkedIn. And, we talked a little bit before the podcast, but I know that's why you started your account on TikTok. And something very special happens when you make it through adversity and you can start to help other people. Because at the end of the day, helping others is helping me at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. That's my exact mindset and why I make the content that I make, because, we go through these negative experiences, but that's what they are until we make them something positive. Making this content is my way and your way of spinning what's happened in our lives to try to make a positive out of it and help other people, which is the most productive way to go about negatives, in my opinion. So I'm completely agreeing with you on that one. But noting that you're in sales and like you're a professional, you're high power, making a very good amount of money, was there negative kickback to you being honest and sharing your story online? Because, some things that people were telling me were, you're never going to get a job again if you go and talk about how you're a gambling addict online. And that's okay with me. But seeing that you're in the position that you are, what was your experience like with that?
There's always going to be the number one, the self-limiting beliefs and the story that you create in your head. Hey, if I post this, what are people going to think about me? And I'll tell you what, my best performing posts on LinkedIn, because they give you like analytics, are the ones that I almost never posted because I was afraid of what other people were going to think. And what I found was when I was in my most vulnerable, authentically me state, that is what people connected with the most. They see you for who you really are and they appreciate that and they connect with it. Because the reality is everyone, I don't care who you are, I don't care how much money you make, I don't care what you look like, I don't care whatever your situation is, every single person is struggling with something. And so for me, what I realize is that, hey, I'm talking about gambling, but I'm talking about something bigger here. I'm talking about the ability to break through barriers and make it out the other side. The ability to communicate that asking for help and realizing you need help is totally okay. It's actually quite courageous. And especially men, what I find is that they think that it's cowardly to ask for help and that they have to do it all on their own. And so for me, what I found was like, yeah, it was a little scary at first, but I never got any pushback. And I actually had people reach out that were leaders at other companies or at my own company and said, like, really appreciate you posting that. I kind of needed that today. Very interesting aspect because, definitely had those self-limiting beliefs, but the best posts I have are when I talk about my journey.
I think that the phrase self-limiting beliefs is what we should dive into next, because as like someone who, I was gambling every single day, just that was my whole identity. My self-limiting belief was, hey, you're never going to find what you love in life, so just do this because life's short. And whether it's considered, I believe it's called hedonism, or just like thinking, I want to live my life to the fullest right in the moment. What would you say to someone who has made gambling or their addiction their identity? Like, what would you encourage them to do as a next step moving forward in life?
Yeah, I think you really do need to take this idea of personal inventory and see how it's affecting the different areas of your life. I'm a big fan of the author Ryan Holiday. He wrote a book, Discipline is Destiny, and he says, when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. When I was gambling, I was checking scores at family events. I wasn't present in relationships. As a result of losing money weekly, I was naturally in a depressed mind state, and it affected how I showed up at work. It caused me to be insecure and needy with other people and relationships. And so, because gambling was my identity, it affected all these different areas of my life. And it caused me to believe that there's no way that Anthony can evolve and be something more than what he currently is, because this is my reality. This is what I do. I just wake up, go to work, gamble, and the cycle goes on. And so for anyone listening, I encourage you to realize that because you're gambling, there's other areas of your life that are suffering. And everything good in my life that I have today can be pointed back to the fact that I'm not gambling. If I was gambling, I'm not on this podcast with you. If I'm gambling, I'm not living in this apartment. If I'm gambling, I don't have a relationship with my current girlfriend. If I'm gambling, I don't have a good relationship with my parents. If I'm gambling, I probably don't have the job. If I'm still gambling, I don't even know if I'm here on this earth. Removing the gambling from my life allowed me to open up my perspective on all the things that were possible to live and think a better life for myself. And that only became possible when I stopped gambling. And so for anyone listening who's made that their identity, realize that there is always two choices. You always have a choice every day. You could continue down the path, or you can take the uncomfortable path and choose to live and think a better life for yourself. It's all possible. It takes a ton of work, but it all starts with a single choice you make. Sometimes it's by the minute, sometimes by the hour, but ultimately you stack up those different choices every day. And then 6 months, 9 months later, you look and your life is completely different. You have a completely new identity, all because of the choices that you chose to make the previous days.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, man. And I think that when we're done this podcast, you should clip it and send it over to TED Talks, because you should be a motivational speaker. you're hitting different right now. But
I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, man, of course. That was awesome. Well said. I think I want to change the trajectory of the conversation a little bit, because there's been an obvious recent shift in America towards online gambling.
Yep.
Was your gambling mainly online, or was it through, in person and or like a bookie?
Yeah, so it was everything. I probably had at number of different times. I had like 3 bookies. I was using the typical apps. I would screw one bookie over, move to the next. I would, I was online gambling through apps and websites through bookies that they had.
I got you. Do you think that had it been, 20 years earlier and you had to go to the in-person casino all the time, do you think you would have ended up in the same situation? Or do you think that it was online that pushed you over the edge?
I probably still would have found a way to get that action, to be honest. But having accessibility to the online apps and everything being so easy, it definitely skyrocketed everything. Like, I was able to bet on cricket, and I was up till 4 a.m., refreshing ESPN, all because I got to do it on an app, So it just made it more, it amplified it.
Sure.
Let's say that. It definitely amplified it, and I couldn't agree more. I think it's a silent pandemic no one's talking about, because number one, people don't realize what gambling addiction is. They don't realize they have one until often it's too late. They associate sports with having a little bit of action every time, right? Fantasy or in-game betting, whatever it is. Like, it's become the norm with these organizations that are partnering with these leagues. So it's going to continue to get a lot worse for a lot of people, especially in our age demographic.
Absolutely. And we're the target demographic for the online casinos. So obviously, That's why we're going to end up feeling it. But I see that you got a couple of like sports memorabilia things in your background. So My question to you is, when you stopped getting that action, when you stopped having something on the line in the game, did you keep watching the games, or did that like kind of fade out?
Yeah, so in the beginning, I stopped watching sports for the first few months, and then whenever I would watch sports, because I was living at home during the pandemic, when I moved back from San Francisco. I made sure that I was watching, only with my dad, and I didn't have my phone on me. But what I also found was that I don't enjoy I didn't enjoy watching other teams that I didn't actually care about at all. So like I stopped watching basketball completely. I realized I hate basketball. I know you're a basketball fan, but like I honestly didn't enjoy it unless I had action on it. When I was a kid, I really enjoyed watching the Yankees and the Jets before I was gambling. And then, through high school, college, I didn't really care about them as much because I was just like, only thing I care about related to sports if my bets are winning. And so I got to reclaim some of my true fandom for my specific teams and actually enjoy following the storylines of the players and the team. I've moved away from needing to watch every single game to just enjoying being a fan. But I will say it could definitely be triggering for some people to continue to watch sports. So I would definitely caution those if you're trying to stay abstinent from gambling to, limit yourself and make sure that if you are watching sports, you are doing it surrounded by people that realize if you have a problem or not. And so for me, I'm a big sports fan. I realize naturally without the gambling, but it's definitely limited my scope of like who I actually care about watching. I think I have a really good grasp on never wanting to go back to what my life was like. And so that's really the thing that I anchor on every single day is thinking about if I gamble, I know exactly what my life can turn into and I never want to go back there. And so that is what keeps me anchored anytime I think about watching sports or even just like every day. And I really try to tap into gratitude every day and remind myself like, hey, everything you have right now is because you're not gambling. And it grounds me for the day.
Well, firstly, like with the sports, I get the question a lot. Do you still watch sports after you stop gambling? And very similar to you, I've ended up only watching the teams from Philadelphia. I used to care about, any team, whether it was like the Detroit Pistons or the Lakers, whatever I had action on is what I cared about. But definitely when I stopped gambling, I realized I wasn't a huge sports fan. I was a huge gambling fan. And so when that finally caught up to me, I realized that, watching sports was just my outlet to get action on the games. So I completely relate to what you said there, but I'm glad that we dove into it because a lot of people are hesitant to watch sports. But, I think the overarching theme of what you just said is to know yourself and put yourself in a situation where you're not going to allow it to ruin your life by enjoying something that you can enjoy. So whether that be watching with friends and family or, watching without your phone, those are great ideas. So I wanted to ask you, a lot of people, they start gambling and, whether it's they start with sports or they start with, blackjack or whatever it is, they eventually get to the point where they feel like the action's moving too slowly. Did you ever feel that and like move into either, shorter term sports bets like betting on quarters or halves or then moving into casino games? Like, did that happen to you?
100%. I ended up betting like what the first pitch was going to be of the inning. There's going to be scores in the inning. So yeah, it definitely progressed for me where I just needed those quick hits of dopamine and trying to win money. I would do like crazy parlays that made no sense at all, trying to get that big hit. And, the classic thing would happen. I started counting my money before I won it, talking about what I was going to do with it, and then end up losing. Or when I would win, I would lose it all. So those classic, tales of, never being able to stop even after a win and continuing to chase. And the chase is what really spurred the, hey, I have to bet this second half or the game live or whatever. So 100%.
Yeah, just keeping the action rolling, keeping chasing after that urge. And I like what you said that like no win was ever enough because I like to say that wins fuel future losses for gambling addicts because we just don't know when to stop.
For me, I tried getting out of debt with gambling. It just shows like how twisted and illogical thinking is, right? No money was ever enough. I could win all the money in the world, even if I paid off whatever debt with that money, which I never did. Even if I did, hypothetically, I would still go back and try to win more for whatever reason. So it was never enough.
So at the end of your gambling, you mentioned that you hit a period that was referred to as like your rock bottom. Do you want to dive into maybe a little bit deeper to illustrate what that looks like for someone who may be in a rock bottom but doesn't quite understand it yet?
Yeah, I relate rock bottom as like being completely disgusted with your state of life and your current state. Um, for me, what that looked like was I didn't feel like me. I felt like, I was just this like completely different person that I couldn't even recognize, not only physically, but mentally. So, like, I was partying on the weekends. I literally gained 60 pounds over the last, year and a half prior to that date. And, sitting there, my clothes weren't fitting, um, drained, exhausted, and the money as well. Like, I was 26 with a sub 500 credit score, like, and mountains and mountains of debt that were self reflected wounds. When you do that much damage at such a young age to yourself, you often can think like, hey, like, why should I even be here? Like, what's the point? Like, I'm just going to continue to dig myself deeper. The reality is, again, like, I truly believe like nothing changes until it changes. And so I had a choice. It was like, hey, I'm in this situation, feels like a Mount Everest to climb. Like, what other choice do I have? I really don't have any other options. So for me, it was this idea of like putting my shovel down and stop digging and starting to climb out step by step. And what I found was I was in this hole, but because I surrendered and passed over, my willpower to this gambling addiction and realized I didn't have to do it on my own, I found that I was able to climb out that hole quicker because I had people around me grabbing me out of the hole, whether it was my sponsor, people I met in the program, my parents, my therapist, all because I admitted that I had a problem and needed help. You'd be shocked to find how many people want to help you when you admit you have a problem and that you need help. And you can get yourself out of that hole quicker, because if I tried to do it on my own, like, it would have been very hard to climb out by myself.
No, I completely agree. So going off that, like, what was it like going to that first meeting? A lot of people are hesitant to go to the meeting for one reason or another, but what was it like for you, your experience with it that very first night?
So leading up to it, because I was sitting in the airport for 12 hours, my mom kicked me out of the house, and she's like, you had to go to GA, sending me all these numbers to call. And I started like YouTubing, like GA meeting on Reddit, first GA meeting, what's it like? All these articles, because I was scared. Because you think about GA and you're thinking about like Alcoholics Anonymous, and you see all these movies and TV shows, and you don't want to admit that you're that person. It's really hard to admit that like this is who you are and this is like what you're about to do. But had I not done it, like I wouldn't have the recovery that I do now. So for me on that first day, I kind of just like stopped thinking about it and just did it. I was like, okay, if I hate it, I don't have to come back. But I also know that like I have this ultimatum from my parents, so I need to give myself a chance. Like, I just have to give myself a chance this time around. And so went to the first meeting, and shockingly, all my self-limiting beliefs were incorrect, and it was actually quite pleasant. And I was welcomed, and no one judged me. And for the first time in forever, I actually felt like I was in a safe space where I didn't feel like everyone was judging me. And it was quite nice. And everyone just says like, keep coming back. And I did that. And it ended up working for me. So, to anyone listening that's hesitant, again, you have two choices. Like, you don't have anything to lose. If you don't like it, you'll be in the same exact spot as you were before. So why not give it a chance? Because it could project you into a better state. And if it doesn't, then you're exactly where you were before. You don't really lose out on anything except maybe an hour of your time. I think also too, you have to be there has to be an idea of that, like, you want to do it for yourself. When my mom made me go, I wasn't truly going because of her. I was going because I actually wanted to change my life. I wanted it for myself. And so people that are listening, you have to make that choice for yourself. Like, going to the meeting alone is not going to fix your problems. But if you go to the meeting with an intention that you actually want to change, you want to put in the work, then that's when the magic happens. But again, like going to a meeting is better than nothing. So like try it, but the real magic happens when you can admit that you're powerless over this thing that you want to change.
Yeah. I think that what the meeting does is it pulls back that curtain to say, you're not alone in what you're going through, because unless you have a family member or know someone who's like in recovery themselves, it can feel very isolating to be a gambling addict. I don't have any family members who are addicted to gambling, so until I went to a meeting, I thought I was the only one, which is an absurd thought, knowing that there's hundreds of millions of people affected by gambling around the world in a negative way. But yeah, no, I think that what you say is important, that you have to want to go for yourself. If you're going to make a mom happy, make a dad happy, make your girlfriend happy, or your boyfriend happy, like you're going for a positive reason, but you're not going to find lasting impact, because the only requirement to go to those meetings is a desire to stop gambling, not a desire to make your mom happy, not a desire to make your girlfriend happy. It's to stop gambling for yourself. So that was an important distinction that I want everyone listening to take note of, that if you've made it this far into the podcast, there's a decent chance that you want to stop gambling, and that is what you need to, that's all you need to go to those meetings. So give them a try. So Anthony, before we, start to close this one out, I wanted to just ask you a couple of hypothetical questions I've asked people who've come on the podcast before. If you could go back to the point, in which you started gambling, let's call it formal gambling, like sports books, and you could tell yourself anything other than, hey, dude, don't do it, what would you say?
I would say it's not going to turn out like the story that you're telling yourself. The story that I told myself when I was in those ages was like, it's not a big deal. What's one bet going to do? I'll probably win because I know everything. I did all this research. The story in your head is not true. It's the addiction. The story in your head is the addiction trying to persuade you to do this thing. And so the thing I would tell myself is that doesn't have to be the story you tell yourself, because it's not true.
That's awesome. I haven't heard that response, but I completely would say something very similar if I had to think about it. So well said. Additionally, we get a lot of these advertisements now, whether it's FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM. These huge multi-billion-dollar casinos are pumping the ads out on sports games, on like any TV network, and online. Though, I mean, I don't think they're going to go away anytime soon. What are your thoughts on those advertisements?
Yeah, what I do when I see one, I literally verbalize out loud and I say like you're full of shit. I will literally berate the ads. And so like I'm telling myself the story and reminding myself that like, hey, they've got you before, but they're not going to get you again. Think about it. Who in their right mind would pay you if they didn't think they were going to get their money back? Who would give you free money? No one. It is a complete scam. It's really great marketing. But once you realize the game that's being played, the only reason those ads exist is to make you a customer so that you lose money and hand their money back to them tenfold. And so like when I see those ads, I will literally call it out. Now I do it more in my mind. But like in the beginning, even if I was with my mom, I'd be like, Mom, this company full of shit. Like imagine doing this or whatever. So yeah, I think it's crazy how much marketing is out there for it. The way that you rewire your brain is like telling yourself a different story about it. So just reminding yourself like, no, this is not going to fall for this trick again. I know exactly where this road leads. And but yeah, it's awful, to be honest. That's my reaction to them.
Yeah, I think that for me, it's like, I watch TV and I watch movies with like my family, and the way that it used to be like when you would see like a scene where people were like kissing on screen or something like that. That's what it is now when the gambling ad comes on, and I'm sitting next to my mom. I'm like, ew, like what is that? Ew, kind of.
Yeah. Exactly.
But yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, if you had a platform where you could speak to 100 million people about addiction recovery, what's one thing that you would want to make sure that everyone knew starting off in their recovery journey?
There's 3 words that I would talk about. It would be acceptance, courage, and action. So accepting accepting that you have a problem, having the courage to ask for help, and then taking consistent action every day to try to change your current state. Those are the three things that you need in order to really start working the program and working your recovery and starting to live and think a different life. You don't have to like buy anything, you don't have to invest in anything. It's already within you to do it. You just have to admit to yourself and someone else and accept that you need help and that you have a problem. And then you need to have the courage to take action every day. And taking action means like doing the opposite of what you did before. Taking action means refraining from gambling, going to the meetings, getting a sponsor. I think there's ways to like ban yourself from apps. It's like you got to take the small actions every day and show up for yourself every single day, or else it's not going to work. But the first and most important thing is the acceptance piece. Once you accept something about yourself, there's this weight that gets lifted off your shoulders because you have this like heavy weight of like, hey, I know I have this problem. I probably should address it. And you're probably like, if you're listening to this, you probably are either in recovery or you're thinking about it. If you're thinking about it, you probably need to address it. And once you accept, you can then have courage to take action and ask for help. But yeah, those are the three things that I would talk about.
So Anthony, just before we wrap this up, is there any kind of message that you want to share with the audience, or let them know where they can find you online?
Yeah, so you can find me on my LinkedIn if you want to follow me there. And I guess the final message would be that if you're struggling right now, like I get it, but you have to know that there is a better and different way that you can think and live within your life. And it all starts with the choices that you make today. And it is possible. You know, there's people like me out there. There's people with plenty of more time in recovery than me. So it is possible. And it all starts with, you know, the choice that you make for yourself. And so that's the message that I would want to get across.
That's awesome. So thank you, Anthony, for coming on. You're coming up on your 3.5 years into recovery. You're about to be 4 years in. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll be 4 in December. So a little bit over 3.5.
Well, congratulations once again. And to everyone listening, it shows you that it certainly is possible to recover from a gambling addiction if you put the work in. So once again, thank you, Anthony. And to everyone in the audience, let's keep getting better together, one day at a time.